We are in our 5th class of the 6-class series. And so I appreciate everyone kind of sharing with me some more deeper personal things that they've been going or that they've had going on in their life, because that really helps me kind of calibrate to you guys when I get your feedback and hear what you're going through. And then I also kind of wanted to spend some time just talking about this like encompassing topic that we all came here for, which is Journey to the Soul. And I don't know, how this series has maybe interfaced with your own personal journey directly, although I've heard some snippets here and there. This journey to the soul thing is something that just kind of happens over extended periods of time, and by no means do I expect you have this incredible enlightenment about who your soul is within 6 weeks. Yeah. Like I said in the beginning, I can show you the vision, right? I can't get you there, but I can show you the vision of, what's possible and what can be attained. And we've also now kind of been introduced to some tools. And so there's a big difference in that. But I think that our physical asana practice with the postures can be very symbolic of our journey to the soul. And there's kind of these 2 ways of going about life. You just throw yourself in there and you manage and see what comes up, and you kind of face whatever gets thrown your way. And there's a lot of life that just kind of happens anyways, right? And then there's this other mentality where we try and integrate skills, we try and integrate tools that we know we resonate with. And then as those things come up that we can't predict or that we can't manage, we at least have a tool that we might be able to plug in to help with the processing, right? Our brains are very, very fascinating because they want consistency, they want predictability. And when you look out in life, life is everything but that in many ways. And so there's this weird interfacing that kind of happens psychologically with our brain and with life. And then we also have childhood. And this is where we learn a lot of programs and thought process and a mental schemata of our world. This is what creates our ideas and our thoughts about what's possible, what relationships are, what to be careful of, what's safe, what's dangerous. And I think that it's natural for that to get confronted as we go through life, especially when there's this default of security. And then in order to grow, in order to expand, we have to be able to manage and work through that in some way. So I hope that some of the tools that we've covered, even from the very first session, which is just learning how to be present in the body, that can be a great tool if you start to get dysregulated emotionally. And what that means is you might start to feel your blood pressure raise, maybe your face gets a little hot, maybe you start feeling your body tense up, or very clearly when you're around someone you don't want to be around, it's like, I got to get out of here. And that generally, those are feelings of dysregulation happening in the body. And that can help give us, again, some signs as to what's dangerous and what's safe. This is our body's natural calibration to life. But what happens when this dysregulation comes up and it's beneficial to face what we're facing? And that's really the challenge that I hope these tools can help with, is that there are moments and there are times when life can be very uncomfortable, yet it's extremely beneficial to try and figure out what's going on there and figure out what we might need to make it a little bit more comfortable. And that's where I truly believe we can start to become this magnificent expression of ourselves and our soul, is it when we start to work through that discomfort and try and figure out what we need for comfort to work through those difficult things. And again, naturally, it's like we want to go back to comfort zone. We want to move away from that discomfort, which is appropriate at times. There are times when that's very, very appropriate. But I would encourage you to maybe find those areas in your life that, where am I facing discomfort, or where am I feeling I need to move away from this thing, and just observe and start to ask questions. I don't necessarily believe you should throw yourself into an unhealthy situation because it's uncomfortable and you should question that unhealthy situation. That's not necessarily what I'm recommending, but start to ask questions. Find out, is this really an unhealthy situation? Is this really something that's not beneficial? Or are my security systems just coming to play because this is new, because this is something I'm unfamiliar with? And a couple weeks ago, we talked about our protectors or our parts. And there are parts of us that start to come in and they want the very best for us. And so they might defend. I have my own protectors that are like warriors, like they're ready for battle with other things and other people. I have protectors that want to pull away, avoid, a lot of avoidance tendencies, just to soothe. That's the attempt, that's the goal. So finding out, are those protectors at play, or can we soothe them and engage from our true self? And that's where we started to do some of that parts work in the meditation, which is really just spending time with that part, acknowledging that they're present, acknowledging that they're there. The tapping can also be beneficial for that dysregulation that might come up, that play of pieces coming out of us that maybe aren't our true selves. The tapping is a tool that we practiced last week that can help manage some of those things. So I hope that you kind of start to think more in an integrative mentality with a lot of these tools, is that you'll have to pick out in your life when each tool is applicable and how you can benefit most from them. The yoga practice is incredible. It starts to teach us how to draw into the body, teach us how to observe those internal systems that might get dysregulated in our responses to life, because that's really all we have control over, ever. And we think that we have control over this outside world and we can manipulate things to certain degrees in our life, but there's so much we do not have control over. And I think that there's a big illusion when we think we can manipulate these things outside of us. There's a very big illusion happening that that's just how life works. And the truth is that's not always the case. There are many situations that I've been through in my life where it's like I'm blindsided, like never saw it coming, never had any idea that that would be my fate or that would be my experience. And that's when, it can be kind of a crazy thing where it's like, wow, you almost feel like you're drowning. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. Like, this is something I never expected. And you're kind of left picking up the pieces from there. But that's kind of a little bit of a segue into what we're talking about today, which is this idea of our future self. And I want to reference a guy named Viktor Frankl. Is anyone familiar with Viktor Frankl? Yeah. So he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and he is a Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist who was in the concentration camps during the Nazi war. And he survived them. And as soon as he came out, within 11 days, he produced this book, Man's Search for Meaning. And within 11 months after that, he went on a tour around Vienna, doing all these speeches and lectures. And there's another book that you can get of his called Yes to Life in Spite of Everything. And one of the big concepts that he talks about is the difference between people who have a clear meaning in their life and others who don't have meaning or who struggle to find it. And what he saw in the concentration camps is that people who struggled to find their own meaning in life, it was very easy for them to want to die, to take their own life. There was a lot of suicide happening in the concentration camps because of course, what they were going through. However, there were handfuls of people that had an incredible sense of meaning and understanding that there could be something awaiting for them on the other side of the experience. And that even day to day, maybe their meaning and their purpose in life was to be there for each other. And it was that deeper sense of meaning that kept them moving and kept them alive. And Dr. Frankl talks about how he could see the difference visually between people who had meaning in their life and who didn't have meaning in their life, because the people who had meaning had a will to live and those who had no meaning didn't. And it was very clear they were physically decaying, physically becoming unhealthy. And that's always something very fascinating to think about. We can see this too with Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a stem cell biologist. He has a book out called Biology of Belief. And what he talks about is how stem cells and cells in our body will actually adjust based on their environment. And there's essentially two states that your body is in. Your body is in a state of repair, a state of health, where your nervous system is calmed down, not super engaged. And then you have another state where your nervous system is extremely engaged and your body's main focus becomes survival. And when we interpret that things are not safe in our life, our nervous system automatically clicks into this state of survival. Sometimes it's natural for that to spike up. And if you have a healthy nervous system, it can cool down pretty quickly and you can get back to that state of health regulation, healing, and cellular rejuvenation. However, there are certain circumstances like prolonged stress and chronic stress that can amp our nervous system up into a state. And he brings up this state of dis-ease actually creates disease. We're not able to cellularly heal. We're not able to rejuvenate on a cellular level. And this is where you see inflammation. This is where you start to see a lot of autoimmune issues. Problems just start to come up. So he has a great book as well that really connects what are we physically going through in comparison and in relationship rather to our mental situation. And there's a huge, profound connection that's happening there. So he has a quote, or Dr. Joe Dispenza, which is another kind of guy who's studying some of these things. He has a quote that says, be aware of what you're thinking because your cells are listening. And this is very, very important to keep in mind as you go through life. And hopefully that can encourage you to think beyond what's happening in your headspace and in the mind as far as you interpret the world and seeing what's actually happening in the body. What is my body picking up in this type of circumstance and situation? Very dynamic relationship. But we'll explore a little bit more with this idea of meaning, with this idea of future self, and how do we be present while also maybe having some sight on something greater, something bigger, something that we're potentially not experiencing right now. That's how we can get to new levels of our life, is finding that balance and being present versus having some idea of what that future opportunity might look like. So we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later in class. But first we'll start with a yoga asana practice, or practice with postures. I want to open up the floor and find out if there's any questions regarding anything that we've covered so far, or even questions about your own personal practice or things that you're toggling with mentally. Yes, Cindy? Mm-hmm. Where you're going back? Yes. Yeah. Bridge pose? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what happened is I was doing exercise, my girlfriend called, so then I talked to the phone and lady gets the back bend pose. Then I cut him off. Yeah. Maybe I sprained my ankle so I won't hurt my back. Is that what it is? Mm-hmm. That's good. Absolutely. That back leg. Yeah. We'll explore some of that stuff today, actually. Yeah, that's a great question. Is there anything else that anyone has coming up in their own practice? No. So many things, right? No. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start here in Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. So you'll have the feet together, knees wide. And notice here what's happening in the back. And if it's hard to bring some sensitivity there mentally, you can always use your hands But if you notice that that low back is rounding and the hips are kind of tucking up and forward, grab some height to sit on and see if you can bring your weight to your sit bones so you can sit up nice and tall. What happens when we actually lift the pelvis up and sit on something, it lowers our center of gravity and it becomes a little bit easier to sit upright. Nice. And so as you take a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale, you can hold on to your ankles. And with that gentle grip on the ankles, try to squeeze your shoulder blades into your spine and roll the shoulders down your back. Nice. You gently lengthen your inhale and exhale. Soften any tension in the face or the eyes. And observe in your body where there might be some tension, where there might be some softness. Is there anywhere that feels very short? Or is there anywhere that feels very long? Is there any tension in the neck, jaw, or throat that can be let go of? Slowly open your eyes, and we're gonna, either you can choose to stay in this position, or I'm gonna give you the option to practice a pose called Siddhasana, which is just a seated pose of the Siddhis or sages. And so I'll show and then we can do together. I'm gonna scoop underneath my ankle, point my toes, and I'm turning the top of my foot down to the floor with my heel in line with the pubic bone. Same is gonna happen on the other foot. Today we're just lining up the heels in line with one another, in line with the pubic bone. Shin is facing the floor. So Greg, go ahead and have something to sit on. And see if once you have support, or Brianna, it looks like you're able to accomplish this without, we really want to see if we can get that razor edge of the shin facing the floor. And as that razor edge of the shin presses down, can we use that to lift up and sit nice and tall? And if you're still in Baddha Konasana, you can keep holding onto the ankles. If you're in Siddhasana, you'll place your hands on the knees here, sitting up nice and tall. How's that feeling, Rhonda? You're not long enough? Center in line with the pubic bone. And so if the ankles are tight, usually sitting up on higher seat, it's going to help get some more of that rolling of the razor edge of the shin down to the floor. A lot of this is hip mobility. Ankles feeling okay there? How are your ankles feeling, Rhonda? Yes. That's fine. You could try folding the blanket underneath you a little bit more and see if you could sit up a little bit higher. Or you can point the toes forward slightly if it becomes very uncomfortable. If that's comfortable for you, yeah, you can sit on a block. Nice. Look at that. Beautiful. Do you feel stable on your block? Go ahead and adjust so that I can see your hips are shifted slightly. So you could go ahead and pull the blankets out completely so that they're out of the way. And then go ahead and try and turn that block up one more height. So right now it looks like it's on the low setting. See if you can flip it up to the medium setting. There you go. What's going on for you? Okay. There you go. Nice. Look at that. Good job. You sit up nice and tall, tuning back into the breath. Observe how that anchoring of the razor edge of the shin or the shins, plus the sit bones down into the floor, they provide a base for the spine to grow up from. Letting go of any tension in the shoulders, the sides of the neck. And gently lengthen your inhale and exhale. Really taking this time to just fully tune into the moment, into your body. On your next inhale, bring the hands into Namaskar, prayer pose. Here's the palms rest against one another. You'll feel your wrists resting at the base of the rib cage. With that slight pressure of the palms, the shoulders are rolling back and down the spine. We'll start class today by chanting 3 ohms together as a group. Let's start with an inhale. Keeping the chest rising. At the end of your next exhale, you can bring your chin down to your chest, surrendering the head to the heart, intellect to intuition. And bring your hands down to the thighs with the palms facing up. And slowly lift your head and open the eyes. Notice which leg is closest to you, because we'll take a moment to do the other side. So you can straighten the legs and then bring the opposite leg in, hooking under the ankle. See if you can turn that shin bone down. And then same for the other leg. Different hips, same body, different hips. You could add some more height as well, Gray. Yeah. Sitting up nice and tall once you've found some comfortable support for it. And I think that this pose can helpfully show how props can be of aid for us, in the sense that, you know, sometimes our bodies aren't always immediately capable of things. And we're looking for this incredible mobility with different poses, this whole spectrum of mobility. And props can give us a little bit of some sight into what that experience might be like. And then eventually we can start to, you know, shed the props. They're not to be dependent on for the rest of our practice necessarily, but they do give us the opportunity to experience things beyond what we might be able to access on our own. Noticing how this side might be different. So you press the shins down, take a nice deep exhale, and draw the belly button into the spine as you lift the chest up nice and tall. Rolling the tops of the shoulders back and down the spine. Leg cramps? That's okay. Yeah, you can let it be softer, farther away from the pelvis. Yeah. And if it really starts to bother, just moving into the Baddha Konasana, so you can decide what's best for you. Where's that line of uncomfortable? How do we properly challenge it? Sometimes it's not worth just working through, so. And then we'll go ahead and shift into Baddha Konasana now. So just sliding the knees out farther apart, feet together. Yes, Cindy. You can take your hands behind you with the fingers kind of pointing forward on fingertips. Rolling the shoulders back, lifting the chest up nice and tall. And then you can bring your knees together and we'll straighten the legs out one at a time, about as wide as the mat. Sitting up nice and tall here. Let's see if you can keep the side waist long. Reach the arms up and overhead. Very nice. And go ahead and bring the hands down and we'll come up to stand. So last week, we'll kind of do some of the stuff we did last week again, just to warm up the shoulders and the upper body. And so we'll start with a strap and we'll just be standing on our mats. Huh? This is where a nice long strap is beneficial. So we'll start by doing these arm rotations with our strap. Arms are straight and we're taking the strap up and overhead all the way back down to our hips and then pulling it back forward. The intention is to pull the strap ends away from each other, but also keep the arms straight the whole time. If you notice any stickiness in the shoulders, perhaps it would be helpful to slide the hands away from each other. So you can kind of decide what's best for you here. But again, we should feel as though we're pulling the strap ends away from each other, keeping that strap nice and taut as we take the arms up and overhead. So take a nice deep exhale, belly button into the spine, tuck your tailbone down to the floor. Your tailbone? Oh, I was gonna say, whew, that's a little challenging sometimes. We'd still be able to do class today though. And just one more time. Probably feel the shoulders getting quite warm here, maybe even a little bit achy. And once you bring the arms forward and down, you can let them go ahead and rest and relax. And we're gonna drop our strap and find some space at the wall. We're gonna start by standing in mountain pose up against the wall. And so you will want a tall wall, meaning one that doesn't have the window there. These windows are okay because they're above the shoulders, so this would work. That's a little small. You're quite petite, but that area might be too small. There is a spot right behind Rhonda's setup you could fit into if you wanted. And we'll start standing in mountain pose. So you'll be fairly close to the wall. We all have different bum sizes, so it won't be the same for everybody. But I want you to feel like you're able to stand up straight on your heels, and as if you were standing in mountain pose in the center of the room, Tadasana. So we're not necessarily leaning up against the wall right now. We really want it to just give us feedback at this point in time. And the feet are hip width apart, toes turn in slightly so that you have that third toe in. That middle toe comes in line with the very center of our heel. What this starts to do is turns the femur bones inward slightly, and it can actually spread the low back a little bit. Spread that top of the pelvis once the toes turn in slightly. Then you'll take your fingertips to the wall behind you. Notice where your shoulders are in relationship to the wall. And see what parts of your shoulders can you feel against the wall here. And see if you can roll the tops of your shoulders back to the wall as you lift the very front of your chest, almost as if you could lift the front of your armpits up towards the ceiling. Then slide your fingertips down the wall. So we're keeping that roll of the top of the shoulders back to the wall. And as your fingertips slide down the wall, see if you can use that to start to pull the shoulders away from the ears, creating some space across the tops of the shoulders, maybe even the sides of the neck. As you take a nice deep exhale, belly button into the spine, try to tuck your tailbone down to the heels. So even though we're doing this back bend in the upper body, we still have some length in the low back, in the lower body as we practice. I'm gonna take just a baby step away from the wall here. Still the fingertips stay at the wall. And notice what changed. Did the shoulders try to drop forward? See if you can roll the tops of the shoulders back again, imagining your shoulders pressing into the wall. And as you slide your fingertips down, pulling the shoulder blades down the spine, away from the ears. You also might notice the belly, this is kind of dramatic than anyone here, but the belly sticks out, hips pop backwards. See if you can tuck the tailbone down to the heels, belly button into the spine. You're going to keep this general form as you bring your hands along the sides of the hips for Tadasana, mountain pose. Shoulders are still rolling back and down. Tailbone is still tucking down. As the tailbone is anchoring down into the heels, can you grow your spine up towards the ceiling? Very nice. Everyone just rose up like 2 inches. Now keeping this awareness in your body, you can slowly take your arms out and up with the palms facing each other. Notice what changed in the shoulders, in the abdomen, in the hips. Can we still get those shoulders rolling back and down the spine? Can we still get the tailbone tucking down to the heels as we lift the spine up? So anchoring ourselves, rooting ourselves down into the floor so that we can use our breath to grow just a little bit taller with the eyes and the face soft. And then you can bring your hands back down, standing here in Tadasana, and you can go ahead and relax. So notice how the body feels when you kind of release, what changed, what shifted. We're going to come into a pose called Utkatasana, powerful pose. So you can go ahead and step away from the wall. We'll come back to it here in a moment. So just has to be, give yourself just a little bit of space from it. And we'll start with our hands on the hips. And if you can and feel stable enough to do so, go ahead and bring your feet completely together. So inner heels, big toe ball mounts, and Cindy, use your discretion with this. Yeah, we don't want you falling over. And now here, notice how can we bring in that form that we just practiced at the wall. So when the hands are at the hips, what's different here is we pull the tops of the shoulders back, or really rolling the whole tops of the shoulders back and down the spine. Kind of like I mentioned, there's this lift of the front of the armpit And then the top of the shoulder rolls back and down. So there's this circularization that's kind of happening here in the shoulder joint. And as you take a nice deep exhale, you come into just a little bit of a squat, Utkatasana. Notice that the chest drops forward. And where is that line? Can you keep the shoulders back and move the hips a little bit farther down like you're coming to sit on a chair? Hands on the hips, elbows squeeze back together. Good. Squeeze the elbows behind you, Gray. Yep, there you go. Eyes soft, face soft, and then reach the arms up and overhead. See if you can move the hips a little bit deeper down and come back up to stand. Standing in Tadasana. Very nice. We'll do this time, taking the arms up and overhead, rolling the shoulders back and down. Nice deep exhale, bending the knees and coming down to sit. And so there's kind of this balance. Naturally, as we bend the hips, the chest wants to go forward, right? And see if you can roll the shoulders back to lift the chest up. Get the thighs parallel to the floor. Parallel to the floor. Good, Gray. Yes, and come up to stand. And bringing the hands down. Powerful pose. You kind of feel that one, huh? Now, it's a very interesting form because you have that working of the shoulders back, but there's also this tuck of the tailbone and this length that comes from the lower body. So it leaves a great impression for what we're going to do next. We're going to practice that microsurgery position that we were practicing that last weekend, but I'll show for those who haven't had the chance to experience it yet. Wrist is in line with the shoulder, and then I'm standing in mountain pose with my feet hip width apart. My opposite hand that's away from the wall. Today's just going to be on the hip here. We'll be here for a few breaths, switch sides. When we come back to this side, we're going to take the hand behind us in line with the hip and do some work here. My shoulder's not all the way up against the wall for that one, but it's quite close, okay? All right, so standing in Tadasana, let's go ahead and all start with our left hand at the wall, just because I'm gonna reference the left and the right. I don't wanna confuse anyone. So as you come into this posture, how can you integrate what we were just practicing in powerful pose, Utkatasana? Overall, we have this general concept of rooting the hips and the pelvis down as the spine grows up from that place. And I gave you some input about the shoulders because sometimes when we try to grow the spine up, the shoulders like to help out with that. So the back of the body is actually moving down towards the hips. So as the front of the armpit lifts, tops of the shoulders roll back and down. And you squeeze the shoulder blades together. Notice what's happening in that left shoulder. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, observe how can you bring some space in that joint where there needs to be space, some length in that joint where there needs to be length, to move this joint into that position of mobility. If you have any tears in the rotator cuff or traumas, physical traumas that the shoulder has gone through, you might notice some of that stiffness. And this is where the breath can really help out. We're going through some emotional heartaches. You'll feel that front of the chest across the collarbones can be quite tight. This is also where the breath can be very, very helpful. And then you'll gently bring that hand down and just observe without shaking that joint out. What is that impression that has now been left? I'm just taking a moment to observe that while it lingers. And then we'll go ahead and switch sides. So now turning to take our right hand to the wall. If you feel any numbing or tingling in these postures, please feel free to come out on your own accord and allow it to pass before you continue. Spreading the fingers nice and wide. With your left hand on your hip, right hand at the wall. Think about that Utkatasana pose that we just practiced. Powerful pose. The front of the armpit lifts, top of the shoulders roll back. Can you squeeze those shoulder blades in towards the spine? So even though you're pressing your hand into the wall, that whole shoulder joint is actually drawing into the body. So it's as if that upper arm was pulling into the shoulder socket. This can be very stabilizing if you have any difficulties in the shoulder or the neck even. You draw the belly button into the spine, tucking the tailbone down to the heels. See if you can grow the spine up towards the ceiling so the lower body relaxes down. So see if that can soften. Yes. Using the breath, very nice. With every inhale and exhale, see if you can get that top of the shoulder to soften down. Notice if there's any tension or discomfort in the front of the chest, in the front of that shoulder. Smooth, steady inhales, smooth, steady exhales, really tuning into that joint. And then you'll bring your hand down and just observe. Think about what's happening and what's coming up in that joint specifically. And see if there's anything you can become aware of in reference to how the left and the right differ. Is there any different sensations? Maybe both shoulders are sore in the same areas. Just observe these little details. And then we'll turn back to the first side. So left arm is up against the wall. This time our hand will come behind us and you'll shimmy in a little bit closer to the wall, although the shoulder is not fully touching the wall here. The hands behind us with the thumb pointing up towards the ceiling. And the hand will be about hip height. You can take your right hand onto your hip and let that bent elbow be a reminder to practice this same form on the side that's not against the wall. And still the tops of the shoulders are rolling back and down the spine. And as you gently press your left hand into the wall, you're going to feel there's a little bit more muscularization happening here in the back of the arm where that top of the arm meets the back. So really that back of the armpit, so to say. It's really the outer shoulder blade that starts to draw in towards the spine and into the body. This can be one of the more challenging areas to build sensitivity in, and this is a great posture to help with that. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, notice how the mind has the power to focus in on these little details, such as the front of the shoulder or the back of the shoulder. But it can also look at the body as a whole unit. And so as your mind expands into that view, observing what that tailbone is doing, what the spine is doing, what is that opposite shoulder doing? Observing the body as an entire unit. And as you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, notice any areas that might be tight, any areas that might be long. And then you'll gently release that hand and observe for a moment. You should feel a little bit more sensitivity in that outer wing of the shoulder blade, I call it. It's really the back of the armpit that starts to draw in. And we'll move to the other side. Taking the left hand against the wall, about hip height. Thumb pointing towards the ceiling, and left hand on the hip here. Go ahead and turn the toes in slightly so that pelvis, the low back, still stays nice and broad. That'll create a little bit more space for you to tuck the tailbone down. As tailbone tucks down, anchors down, grow the spine up towards the ceiling. As your right hand gently presses into the wall, observe what's happening in that right shoulder. Can you turn your inner arm back to the wall behind you? Outer arm draws into that shoulder socket. This is a very strong external rotation in the upper arm bone. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, see if you can soften any gripping in the tops of the shoulders and the eyes or the face. And think about that Utkatasana pose. As the shoulders roll back, tailbone tucks down, and can we grow the spine up from there? And then you'll release the hand, standing nice and tall. Just observing what sensations are coming up here. You can go ahead and roll the shoulders forward, creating some openness and really spreading the upper back. And then come back to a neutral position. Very nice. We're gonna set up a little bit closer to the wall with our mats, some blankets, and blocks. So I think the best support for what we're about to practice will be to fold your mat in half and take the edge of the mat up against the wall. And then you'll also grab a blanket or two and have that blanket unfolded enough so that it's about the length of your shin. So these blankets, to really, kind of cover the shin, have to be open a decent amount. So I'd recommend having 2 blankets. And then Cindy, this might be a questionable one. So I think in order for you to practice this, you'll need some more blankets. So I'll go ahead and grab you these ones as well. And we'll see if we can give you enough height so that there's no pressure on the toes. We're gonna practice Ustrasana, camel pose. Go ahead and stack those blankets on there. And I think you're gonna need, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
I just want you to know, this was my blanket when I was a little girl.
I used to have one just like that with the silk edging.
And I put some scissors.
So kind of like Cindy's setting up here, we want the rolled edges of the blankets pointing towards the center of the room. This is just a little firmer on the blankets. And so that can be really helpful. So let's try this out for you. Let me see. We want you to be able to kneel and not have a lot of pressure on that toe. And your feet are smaller than mine, so that might be enough.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah, and if it's not happening, it's not happening. See, that looks a little, how's that?
Oh,
We're there, okay. Fabulous. And then you're probably gonna need a little bit more height than these blocks. Let me get you some extra blocks. So Cindy's, you can kind of set up, don't get into the pose quite yet, but you'll set your props up so that you are able to kneel on some blankets up against the wall. The shins are supported, the feet are hanging off. Depending on how much support you have under your shins will determine if the toes are pointed or not. So in a great world, toes will be pointed. So we'll see if we move back to that today. I'm gonna grab some blankets for myself. Sure, yes. If it's not a hassle for you, it would be better, but I know it's not the easiest for you to move in and out. So if you're stuck there and that's just where you're at, then there you go. Good job. Okay, so we got Cindy set up. Huh? I think you'll be okay with the two because of how much height you have. Notice how she has a bunch of blankets to get her foot off the floor because she sprained her ankle. So she's got a little bit of extra support. It's kind of like I said, you'll have the blankets long enough so that you can refold this one, have your shins supported. Huh? So the blankets will be open enough so that you have some shin support. And we want that rolled edge of the blanket pointing out towards the center of the room. That edge is just a little bit firmer. And there we go. Tassels to the wall. And then you can have your blocks on either side. This will generally be your setup as we get started here. And then I'll just demonstrate really briefly and we'll do together. So I'm going to start by facing the wall. In the traditional pose, the toes are pointed back. We now have some support underneath the ankles to help that if there's any tension on the front of the ankle or the ankle joint in itself is tense. Hands come to the wall, just fingertips. Now I have a little bit of something in the way with my practice, but ultimately we want the pelvis driving into the wall. Your guys' thighs and pelvis will touch the wall, okay? And we'll be here in Ustrasana, camel pose, taking a few deep breaths, getting this work in with the shoulders. Some of you guys will even be ready to reach the hands back, find the blocks, and we'll be here in camel pose. We're not dropping the head back. Chin tucks in towards the neck, and if you take the head back, there's all this work to keep the chin into the neck, chin into the neck, chin into the neck, chin into the neck. So even if you do look up to the ceiling, it's not this. You see the difference in my neck between this pose and this pose? Okay, and then coming down, you just sit back. If that's uncomfortable on the knees, you can always scoot away, cross the ankles, and come back to sit, okay? Are there any questions on camel pose? All right, let's go ahead and do. I think that the front of the body is meant to mimic the hump of the camel. Yes. Thighs, knees, pubic bone, all up against the wall here. Fingertips can come to the wall as well, about shoulder height. Yep, so notice now, a little bit of a similar impression happening in the upper body. But as you press your shins down into the floor, even the base of your shin near your ankle, this is what's going to help you drive your pelvis into the wall here. And as the fingertips press into the wall and down, they might not move, but you kind of feel like you're sliding your fingers down the wall to pull the chest up. Yes. Taking a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale. This is a good warm-up practice for the hip flexors. And then some of you are ready to reach the hands back. Let's keep the shoulder action going, keep the pelvis against the wall. And as you roll the shoulders back, let that be what drives you down. Yes, and you can even bring the blocks a little bit closer. Yep. Those might need to be higher. Get you some extra support here. Okay, go ahead and try that. Once your hands are at the blocks, pubic bone into the wall. Pubic bone into the wall. Nice, Rhonda. And then you can come out to rest. And so you can either sit back on the knees or you can cross ankles behind you and come to a cross-legged position. Do you have a question, Brianna? Probably not shortness, it's where the blocks are, I think, because the blankets are a little. Ultimately, the hands come down to the heels. So if you have the blocks in line with the heels there, so Brianna's blanket, it's to get that support under the shin. Go ahead and point the toes, unless your feet are cramping, and the feet are hip width apart. So see if you can spread them out a little bit. Yeah. So go ahead and point the toes back before you come back. Point toes, now spread your ankles apart, but toes still stay pointed. So a little bit more, ankles apart. Yeah, there you go. Yes. And exactly, because this has to happen. Yeah. Did you feel that? Yeah. So the hips, Brianna's noticing the hips, they do pull away from the wall, and it really has to call upon that mobility of the shoulders in order to keep the pelvis up against the wall and get the shoulders back. Yes. Yes. It's a lot, right? Okay, so we're just gonna try one more time. And I wanna show kind of what was going on with Brianna, because I think that there's more than one person that's managing it. So eventually hands come to the back of the feet. This is Ustrasana, camel pose. The hands are actually resting on the base of the feet here. So hands come in line with the heels, but if you notice, this edges of the blankets are really in the way, honestly. So if you need to shift your blankets and kind of wedge them in to get your blocks into a better position, we can go ahead and do that. Can also help add some height underneath the blocks as well. This next time when we practice, we'll see what's going on with the neck and see if we can get that tuck of the chin, gaze to the ceiling as well. Okay? Are there any questions coming up other than what we've talked about? All right. So once you're up, you can adjust the blocks if you feel that that's helpful. The ankles should be hip width apart. So if you need to look back at your feet, you can observe. Yeah, good adjustment, Rhonda. And then the toes point straight back. So if the ankles are tight, the toes are gonna turn out more than the heels. And you'll take a moment here at the wall, really get the shin down, pubic bone into the wall. It really helps to get that edge of the razor edge of the shin down into the floor. Curl the tops of the shoulders back and down the spine. And then you can take your hands on your hips and continue that curling of the upper body, of the upper back, as you start to lean back. Taking your hands to the blocks if that's available to you today. Shin presses down, pubic bone forward, shoulders roll back. Beautiful. Now chin tucks in towards the neck, not the chest, the neck. And see if you can take the gaze up to the ceiling. Nice. And so we're protecting the back of the neck, a little bit more chin to the neck, Rhonda. So it's almost like you're a drill sergeant. You know how they have the chin tucks into the neck even more? Yes, exactly. And then we're lifting from the chest up instead of the chin. Often we lift from the chin, and the back of the neck is ultimately what suffers here in this position. Nice, keep going with the shoulders. Yes, that's what we want. Good, and then come down to rest. Adho Mukha Virasana. So now you're taking the knees wide, toes together, leaning forward. You can come off your mat. We'll just be here for a moment just to get the back of the body open again. If there's any shortness, the knees wide, toes together. Taking a few breaths here. Is your knee bothering you? So we're gonna go ahead and take the blankets off the mat. You'll keep your mat up against the wall. We're gonna come into downward facing dog. And Cindy, you can practice that 90-degree angle at the wall. So this position here for the ankle. For today's Adho Mukha Svanasana, we're gonna practice with our hands in a check mark position. So if you spread the thumb and the index finger, there was this big thing in the 90s. They're like, whatever, right? Creating this check mark position. And we're gonna place this at the wall and step the feet back, mat width apart. And so we'll be here in downward facing dog. And then we'll come down to rest, knees wide, toes together, Adho Mukha Virasana, okay? Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and come into the pose. The hands are at the wall in the check mark position. This is great for shoulders. If you have tense, tight shoulders, this support is specifically recommended. Also, when there's people with shoulder tensions and shoulder problems and you're prepping for handstand, this is also one of those things. So check marks at the wall. Does that bother your wrists when you do that, Brianna? If you were to put the hands like this position? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So what does this do to your arms? What are you noticing that's the difference here? You can blurt it out. Yeah, yes, that the inner arm is kind of rolling up and out. And so see if you can turn that pit of your elbows towards the wall as you do this. Yep, exactly. And then what's happening in the upper back? What's happening in the shoulders? Just like we were practicing in Ustrasana and Utkatasana, so camel pose and powerful pose. A little bit of a different relationship to gravity here. So we still want that, the concept is anchoring the lower body, the hips, the tailbone, while the spine can lengthen. So here, in order for your hips to be anchored, those legs got to be pretty powerful. Go ahead and bend your knees, shoot your tailbone up to the ceiling like a rocket. And we're ready to rest, huh? Okay, so come down to rest. Knees wide, toes together. Sit back on the heels. Let the arms be limp. Arms are limp. Eyes soft, face soft. And then we'll come in just one more time. Placing the hands at the wall in the check mark position. You can curl the toes under. And as you press the hands down, lift the sit bones up, lift the tailbone up. You can straighten the legs if you feel that's appropriate, but really keep those sit bones lifting up towards the ceiling. So the back of the leg has to become very long. Back of the thigh, the hamstring. Nice, Rhonda. And then come down to rest. Knees wide, toes together. Letting the arms be limp. Face soft. Okay, then you can go ahead and come watch for a moment. So I'm gonna use some bolsters just because I wouldn't be able to demonstrate this pose otherwise, since we're gonna be laying on our abdomens. That's not something I can really do right now, but I think with the bolsters, this won't be a problem. So you're gonna be laying flat on the floor. I have these bolsters here to help, but just pretend as though I'm laying flat on the floor. We're gonna come into Bhujangasana. So my toes are pointing away from me, turning the toes in, and I have my hands along the sides of my chest here. A lot of what we've been practicing today is doing some more of this shoulder movement. All right, so here's my shoulders rolled forward. As I start to roll that top of my shoulder back and down the spine, get a little bit more into this position. In Bhujangasana, or cobra pose, our hips are gonna stay on the floor, thighs are on the floor, and we start to kind of lift up here. If the gaze goes forward, similar, chin tucks into the neck, chin tucks into the neck. This is gonna keep you from doing this kind of situation. And instead, we really wanna get the thoracic spine or the upper body active. And then we'll come back down. You can rest with the head on either side, or even fold the forearms and rest the head on the forearms, okay? Are there any questions on Bhujangasana? You'll be at the wall. Yeah, because I don't think that this will be enough support for you. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and do, yeah, almost like, kind of like you're doing a little push-up at the wall. So you'll lay down flat on the floor and start with your hands along the sides of your chest and go ahead and face the center of the room. Make sure that you're far enough away from the wall so the toes are not blocked. The toes are free. And turn your inner thighs up towards the ceiling. So you can lift kind of one leg at a time, with the inner thighs up so the low back is nice and spread long. Toes pointing back. Yep. Yes. Hands are along the sides of the chest now. And before you press up, just notice what's happening in the shoulders here. Can you get that roll of the shoulders up and back? Very good. Yes. So we're not lifting up quite yet, but we're really trying to get the structure of the shoulders happening. Now your chin is going to tuck into your neck as you start to press yourself up. Just like camel pose, pubic bone down into the floor, and go ahead and curl your chest up off the floor. It's like you're peeling the chest up off the floor. Very good. What happened to the shoulders? What happened to the neck? Yes. Good adjustment. Keep going with the shoulders, chin in. Yes, chin into the neck. Because we want more of this to work than your neck. Your neck is lifting a little bit higher. Yeah, yes, exactly. And then come down to rest. So you can cross the forearms in front of you. And so you can decide, Cindy, what's best for you, even if it's comfortable leaning up against the wall, because you're getting a little bit of contact and almost that sensation of peeling the shoulders away from the wall. Yep. We'll do one more time here. Bhujangasana, cobra pose. Turning the inner thighs up towards the ceiling. Pubic bone presses down to the floor. And before you lift up, get the shoulder work happening here. So as you press the hands down, shoulders roll back. And then you might start to peel your chest up off the floor. But it's not a push-up, right? It's instead, we have the elbows squeezing in, shoulders rolling back. Yes, Gray, good. Chin towards the neck, and maybe the gaze goes forward and up. Nice, Rhonda. And then come down to rest, crossing the forearms, crossing the forearms and taking a breath here with the head on the arms. Okay, we have to do one more time. So there's a concept I want to share with you. It's this, the term is called isometric pressure. And essentially what's happening is that you're pressing the hands or your foot or some sort of appendage into the wall or the floor. However, you can also slide it forward or you can slide it back. And once that pressure moving downwards is so much, you're not going to see my hands move, but it's changing what's happening muscularly in my arms and in my shoulders. So this is called an isometric pressure. You're not necessarily seeing the movement, but there's a direction of movement that's happening muscularly. So here in Bhujangasana, often when we come into a push-up, I want you to just observe that often we're pushing down and forward, right? So if I wasn't pushing down, my hands would slide forward in front of me. This very last time, I promise this is the last time, we're gonna press the hands down and see if you can pull the hands back to charge the chest forward as you push up. So not just pushing up again, instead see if you can get that movement of pulling the hands back as you're pressing down and up, okay? We're right there, so I have to give you the opportunity. So last time, hands are in line with the chest, turning the inner thighs in, tailbone tucks down, get that work of the shoulders. And now as you start to push up, just notice our natural, yes, exactly, Gray. The tendency is to push forward and see if you can pull and slide those hands back behind you. Beautiful, yes. Hands sliding back, elbows squeezing in, and then come down to rest. So it's a little bit of a different sensation. Could you notice? It is more challenging, I'm not gonna lie, but there's a different sensation happening there. So that's Bhujangasana. Okay, now we get to go into Shalabhasana. Shalabhasana is locust pose. And so here in Shalabhasana, our hands are in the back of our body. I'll demonstrate briefly so you guys can see where we're going. Very similar setup initially. However, this time I'm going to reach my hands back behind me so I don't have the support of my hands underneath. I'm going to curl the chest up, lift the chest, and eventually the legs will come along with. And then we'll come back down and we'll rest. Okay? So we'll start with the arms and then add the legs. So Cindy, you can practice this with your, like we did earlier in class, with the back against the wall. Tadasana here, taking a little baby step away and coming up. So now this time your hands are alongside the hips, palms face the ceiling. So you can start in Tadasana all the way up against the wall. Yeah, exactly. Now you're gonna lift your arms up off the floor, roll the shoulders back so your whole upper body is peeling off the floor. Yes, lift the head, lift the chest, gaze forward. Shalabhasana, pubic bone is down. Now lift your legs up. Good. Beautiful. Eyes soft, face soft. Smooth, steady inhales, smooth, steady exhales, and come down to rest. Rest the head. So you can decide if the thighs pressing down adds a lot of support for the back. So if you're feeling any agitation in the back, you can go ahead and keep the legs on the floor. Or you're welcome to sit this next one out. We'll practice one more time. Shalabhasana. Palms press up to the ceiling. Shoulders roll back. As you peel the chest off the floor, gaze forward, but the eyes are soft. Now the thighs press, the pubic bone presses down. Cindy, you'll go ahead and take a baby step away from the wall. Yep. And then lift the legs if you feel it's comfortable here. Inner thighs turn up. Inner thighs turn up. And then come down to rest. Nice. So you'll stay here and continue doing this. But this time, your shoulders will come away from the wall. So hands stay, shoulders lift. And that's where you get that Shalabhasana kind of action. And so you can, they're gonna do a different pose, but you'll do the same thing, starting at the wall here. And then as you take a baby step, the whole body is coming away except for the hands. Yep, exactly. Okay. I know there's some fatigue coming in. But we have now accomplished a next step into another pose. We're essentially all set up for it. So it would be, I'd feel like a faulty teacher if I didn't give you the opportunity to at least attempt it. All right, so this is wheel pose, or bow pose rather, Dhanurasana. You're gonna need a strap. You can go ahead and grab that. And then the strap is gonna go underneath your shins, and you'll have the tail end within an arm's reach. So again, you have to imagine these bolsters aren't here and pretend that I'm just sitting on the floor, but I have the strap under my shins. See if I can make sure that they hook. Go lower. Strap under the shins. I'm coming forward. I'm gonna grab on to the belt here, and I'm gonna bend my knees so that my heels come to my buttocks. Oh man. And I wanna get that, you won't have this problem because your knees won't be lifted. Trying to get my buckle, or my strap rather, onto my shins here. And I'm gonna walk my hands down towards my shins. I'm squeezing my knees in towards one another. And here I'm pretty much in Shalabhasana. Got my shoulders rolling back, chest lifting high. And I'm gonna start to pull my shins away from my buttocks here into bow pose. The gaze is forward, keep that tuck of the chin in, and then we'll come down to rest. Okay? All right, let's do it. Yes, all of this. That's why when he said hip flexors, I was like, So the strap is kind of a challenge to get up on the shins. And I can help. And so once you're laying down, heels come to the buttocks. There you go, Gray. So if you get it on the shins, you know, as soon as you pull and put tension, it just slides up the shin. Mine went underneath my knees. Here, I'll help you, Brianna. Mine went underneath my knees because my knees were, yeah, there's a little gap there it got caught on, right? And so you're walking your hands towards your legs. Arms are straight. Do you need a strap? You got it. Here, let's get you a strap. I got it for you. Palms face the ceiling. Yeah. Okay, so here's your tail ends whenever you're ready. Yeah. Okay, so start with the upper body. Knees squeeze together. Walk your hands towards your ankles. So the arms are straight here. Remember Shalabhasana. Arms are straight. Roll the shoulders back. Start to peel the chest off the floor. And now pull your shins away from your buttocks as you lift the chest up. Yes, Gray. Thighs even lift off the floor in this one, believe it or not. So once you get enough tension and resistance there, very beautiful. And then you can come down to rest. Nice. So Brianna, you're at a point you could even walk the hands closer to the ankles a little bit. Taking a breath here, softening the face, softening the eyes. So I'm not going to give you very much instruction. I'm just going to give you a tip. Pubic bone down into the floor. All right, whenever you're ready, or you can sit this one out, rolling the shoulders back, pulling the shins away from you, pubic bone down to charge the chest forward. Nice. And then eyes and face are soft. Eyes and face are soft. And then coming down to rest. Bow pose, Dhanurasana. Nice, good job. Knees together, knees together. Yes. Now pull the feet away from your hips. Yes, keep going. Pull them, pull them, pull them. Feel that tension though? That's why they call it bow pose. You got that resistance that's happening. Very nice, beautiful. Okay, we're gonna rest in Adho Mukha Virasana. So knees wide, toes together. You're gonna come forward, just relax the hands, relax the head. If you want some support under your head, you can grab some folded blankets. But I just want you to take a few breaths here in this position with the back rounding. You should feel that the back of the body is quite open and spacious here. So if your head just rests on the floor, then great. There you go, Cindy. Taking a few smooth, steady inhales, smooth, steady exhales. Breathing into the back of the body here. As you fill the back ribs, even fill the back of the neck. Notice how that space can soften as you exhale. The inhale kind of invites some spaciousness into any tense areas. And see if that exhale can just soften all of that. Those poses are very beneficial for chronic back pain if you have a herniated disc, but it really depends on which direction the herniated disc is facing. So meaning if it's bulging away from your spine or if it's bulging into your body. But those who have it bulging in towards the body actually feel some relief when they do some of those back bends, or excuse me, when it's bulging out of the body. But regardless of what you have going on, notice what's going on in your low back. The back contractions, we call them back bends, but they're really back contractions. And you have all of those muscles along the spine that really do, you know, I don't think grip is the right word, but they do contract pretty strongly. And sometimes those muscles, if they're not worked very often, or even if they're overworked, the back bends can make it quite tender. And so taking this time, noticing if there's any muscles along your spine that are feeling that achiness, that are feeling that tension from those contractions. And as you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, send your breath into those spaces. You can go ahead and slowly press yourself up to sit. And we're going to take this time to practice legs up the wall. So you'll use a blanket for underneath your head, and you can actually remove your mat. It adds some stickiness and it will make it a little harder to come out of legs up the wall. I'm going to show just briefly so you have an idea. We are going to come out of this and move into a shavasana. So if there's any extra props that you want, you can get your mat set up nearby. So an example here is I want no mat for legs up the wall. But once I come out, maybe I want to lay down and have some extra support underneath my knees or my head. So I'll create a separate setup. But for legs up the wall, we're just going to use a blanket underneath the head. So I have this blue one here within an arm's reach. I'm going to start by laying on my hip and scooting my pelvis all the way up to the wall. Then I'm curling my shoulder underneath me. And as I roll onto my back, my knees are kind of tucking into my chest. And then I can take my legs up the wall here. I'll grab my blanket that's within an arm's reach and I'll rest and relax. I'll give you guys the option to bring your feet together, knees wide for Baddha Konasana. And then ultimately when we come out, this is why we don't want a mat. We can just push our feet into the wall and the whole body slides away. And then I can just rest and relax here. And we'll take some time to use the restroom if you need to, or get into a more comfortable shavasana. And then we'll have our little meditation practice. Okay. That's okay. You actually want about a fist's distance between your hips and the wall. Yeah. The tighter the hips are, the tighter the back of the thighs are, the hamstring, the more space you'll want. Okay. You should feel as though your hips and your spine can rest comfortably flat on the floor. It's a very neutral position for the spine. So knees tuck into the chest, Rhonda. Yeah, and then as you roll onto your back, you'll take your feet with you. There you go. Is that vent gonna bother you at all? A little vent by your hip. Is that okay? Or I can help slide you if you want. Okay, perfect. You say so. I'm just taking a few breaths here. You'll have the blanket underneath the head and the neck, but the shoulders should be free from support. You can even roll the edge of the blanket so that it supports the curvature of your neck if you'd like. Great. Do you mind if I make that adjustment for you here? Okay. How's that? Should be in it. Feel as if it's in a more neutral spot, supporting that natural curve of the spine. That looks better. And just using this time to focus on your breath, focus on your body, really feeling the back of the body open towards the floor. Using your breath to create some space. You're welcome to stay in this position if you'd like to. Or you could also try bending the knees and bringing the feet together and taking the knees wide. To move into a shavasana, bring your knees together and push yourself away from the wall. Just taking a few breaths here with the feet on the floor and the body flat on the floor. Letting go of everything, everywhere. You're welcome to stay in this position if you'd like, or if you want to bend your knees, roll to your side, and add some additional support, feel free to do that. You're also welcome to use the restroom if you feel a need to. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, let go of any subconscious tension that might have risen in the face, such as the eyes, forehead, the jaw, or the throat. During today's meditation, I'm just going to pose some questions that you can repeat inside yourself. And when you're asking these questions, rather than thinking and engaging the brain with an answer, see if you can feel an answer from your body, from a deeper sense of being. So notice if the mind starts to think a lot, and see if you can instead bring that question to the body. What is something that brings meaning to my life? What is something that brings meaning to my life? When do I feel this meaning most in my life? When do I feel this meaning the most in my life? Where do I feel this meaning the least in my life? Where do I feel this meaning the least in my life? Even when I feel a lack of meaning in these moments, is there another meaning that I'm not seeing? Even when I'm feeling a lack of meaning in these moments, is there another meaning that I might not be seeing? How does feeling this meaning that I value most impact me and my expression? How does this meaning that I value most impact me and my expression? Are there different versions of me that become expressed when I have meaning compared to when I feel like I lack meaning? Are there different versions of me that are expressed when I have meaning compared to when I feel like I'm lacking meaning? I want to focus more on this meaning in my life that I find value in. I want to focus more on this meaning of life that I find value in. Is there anything I can do to integrate more of this meaning in my life? Is there anything I can do to help integrate more of this meaning into my life? If I could integrate this meaning into every moment of my life, how would my life feel? If I could integrate this meaning into every moment of my life, how would my life feel? As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, continue to experience that feeling of of a meaningful life and what that means to you. Notice if there's parts of you present that doubt whether or not it's attainable, or maybe question. And ask those parts to give you some space so that you can better become curious and better understand these layers of yourself. And then continue to focus on that feeling of what it would be like to live a meaningful life. Rather than worrying about how to accomplish it or the task list that comes along with it, if there is one, just really relax into that feeling as if you already have it in your life. How can I bring this meaning to every moment of my life? As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, observe your body as an entire unit. You can take your time coming up. Whenever you're ready, and slowly bend your knees. Take your arm up and overhead as you roll to your side, trying to bring this state that you're in with you as you move. Whenever the time is right for you, you can start to press yourself up to sit. And once you're sitting, just take a moment to integrate this peace and this inner experience. Bring it along with you as you integrate movement and action. And then you can go ahead and grab your journal and find a comfortable seated posture to be in. Maybe it's at your mat, maybe it's at the table. You're welcome to start jotting down what was most noticeable for you as you focused on meaning in your life. So just start jotting down anything noticeable that came up as you focused on meaning. And then recognizing if there were any moments that you couldn't find meaning. Was there maybe meaning that you could find? Noticing if there's any moments where you couldn't find meaning. And seeing if there's any meaning that you can find. And then last question, if you could infuse this meaning in all of your actions, how would your actions change? If you could infuse this meaning in all of your actions and interactions, how would those things change? And go ahead and finish up any last main thoughts. I want to do a couple of seated twists before we separate today. And so after, you're welcome to continue writing. But as you finish up your thoughts, you can go ahead and take the legs wide. And we'll start by twisting over to the left leg. You can maybe even grab onto that foot. And as you take a few deep breaths here, let the head hang. Allow the back to round. See if you can open that whole side body. It feels very extended. And then we'll come back to center and switch to the other leg. Just allowing the head to hang, the spine to round, and take a few deep breaths. Go ahead and twist where you feel you need it most. And then coming back to center, lean over to the left leg, take the right arm up and overhead. You can do this as deep or as shallow as you prefer. Just using your breath to open up anywhere that's feeling tight or short in that side waist. And then coming back through center, switching to the other side. Taking some nice deep breaths here to bring some space where there might be tension. And then coming back up to sit. We'll cross the legs. We'll do a little seated twist here. Again, just twisting where you need it most. And coming back through center, switching to the other side. Nice deep inhale to create some space. Maybe acknowledge anywhere that's holding on some tightness. As you exhale, see if you can even bring just a hair more softness to those spaces. Coming back to center, noticing which leg is closest to you, switching the cross of the legs. And very briefly, each side one more time. And coming back through center, twisting to the last side. As you come back to center, just take a moment to appreciate your body for all that it's done, all that it will do. Appreciate your mind for taking the time to harmonize with your body today. And send gratitude to your heart for being that powerhouse that keeps you living. I appreciate you all for being here today. Namaste.